All right. Good morning, commissioners, and over to you, Chair Harrington.
That was louder than I thought. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, February 13th, 2025 Washington County Board of Commissioners Roundtable. Thank you, everyone, and that includes staff, for pivoting us over to a virtual only meeting. I think every one of us are probably enjoying the snowy, well, I won't say enjoying, experiencing snowy weather as we sit, hopefully safely wherever we are. We do have somewhat of a short meeting today, which is great. But I do want us to get on with it. We have the full complement of Board of Commissioners: Commissioner Nafisa Fai, Commissioner Jason Snyder, Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Jerry Willey, as in the order that I see you on my screen. So, meeting kickoff. We have the rolling agendas. Heads up that Metro has changed the timeline for their consideration of their two ordinances for a November ballot referral. The slide deck, I saw the updated slide deck at the WA Government Relations Committee meeting this morning. So that means we will likely have to program in stops with the Board of Commissioners more aggressively than we thought we would when they were talking about a referral the beginning of June. Or no, our levies were beginning of June, but we didn't expect that Metro would be so aggressive as to be starting their finalization mid-March and completing it before the end of April. So we've got some work to do. Staff is combing through those dates right now. So beyond that, I hope everyone is getting your dates in. I just hope that the Metro timeline doesn't impact our travel. I know Commissioner Willie and I were planning on participating in the Clean Water Services NACO DC trip in April. So we'll see. Beyond that, the roundtable planning is in your packet. It is the same meeting sequence as we had previously, just fleshing out more of the topics. And we've only planned it out through June because, as we know, there are various projects whose timelines are changing due to the immense amount of work it's taking for us to both continue to understand what our service delivery levels are, what is state supported, what is federal reported, keeping up with this Metro disruption, as well as President Trump's disruptive executive orders. So we are one team Washington County, and we don't want to break our staff. So we are supportive of making the adjustments. We don't have any more money. So the commodity that we do have is time. And so changing our plan of record or changing our plans in order to continue to accomplish the objectives, but doing so on a time scale that we can accomplish together. I think pretty much that was all I had, unless I have forgotten something. No, Tanya's not thinking of anything. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese. I see you raised your hand.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that on the rolling agenda, it has that my trip with WSI to DC as tentative. I think we can take the tentative off of that.
What month is that?
It goes from late March to like April 1st. It rolls over.
Got it. I see it now. Thank you. Need to use the right set. So
I just
the
got a note
latest,
from Nada and she said it's done.
yeah, the latest rolling agenda we have should be from yesterday, the 12th. Yep. Sorry, I still had the one that was in the original packet. So, okay, great. And we will also get some further definite clarity on our meetings in March and April relative to the budget in our next conversation. But before we move to that, any other items that you want to sync up on? Okay, all righty, we'll just keep going then. To budget planning. So there's a presentation that Ms. Angie's going to step us through, but I also asked that the shared services document and the functional area chart be included in our packet. And the reason is this. We have been organizationally, but more concretely as a board, trying to get our hands around what our service levels are. And it's proving to be a pretty arduous task because, as we've all come to know, Washington County's information systems are not at the level to answer those questions easily. So it takes a lot of staff time. And so our staff, led by Ms. Angie, is doing a lot of analysis now, primarily because of our budget. Well, now we have these disruptive executive orders from President Trump. So aren't we lucky that that work has been underway? So we're getting a clearer picture as a result of that. But nonetheless, it is a lot of work. And prior to the board and the budget committee getting Ms. Angie's proposed balanced budget, as she is required to deliver to us before the end of April, we are anticipating that, as we've discussed before, there is likely to be a need to adjust our service level. We've put it quite positively in terms of changing from a gold level of service down to bronze, as more of a, when I put my sort of skeptical hat on, I talk about going down to a satisfactory level. I think really rooted from my tech industry experience and learning or being introduced to a phrase that was attributed to Einstein, that some things worth doing are not worth doing well. So sometimes you just have to be satisfied with doing things satisfactorily so that you have the bandwidth to do a select few things well. So that it means that we as a board have to make sure that our muscles are trained and ready to support difficult decision making during the month of May to a degree that we have not had to do these last few years. So when I think about myself, I think about how, yeah, I've had to make hard decisions. While I was a Metro counselor, had to support layoffs, for example. In the private sector, it's really hard to look people in the eye and say, I'm sorry, but we have to lay you off or we have to fire you. So, so I've been, even though I've done it, I've not exercised those muscles in a long time. So that's why I am thinking about not only myself, but also trying to set a stage so that we can have conversations along the way with Ms. Angie, individually, certainly, but also we make our decisions as a work group, right? We're 5 independently elected officials that the world sees as one entity, the board of the Washington County Commission. Remember how we went through training, and when we individually walk in the room, we're representing the Washington County brand, right? So that's why I wanted, sorry, I'm getting a little long-winded in the lead up to this, but I wanted to put these 2 documents in your hand so that we could prime the pump for at least a conversation next month, a detailed conversation about between today and our March 6th roundtable, what information, types of information or exercises or muscle training do you need to go through so that by April 28th, your decision-making muscles are up to the task so that we as a group will be successful. So without further ado, why don't we go through the budget presentation that Ms. Angie put together with the staff team, and then we'll come back to figuring out next steps. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, take it away, Ms. Angie.
Well, good morning, board, on this snowy morning. I know I have a 13-year-old at home that her snow gear is all ready and she is eagerly watching outside when it's time to gather her neighborhood friends and go sledding. So we all have different perspectives when we have winter weather. So today I actually have only 1 slide to review with you. In your presentation, there is several background slides. Just of note and reference if your board wanted to touch base on those slides. Chair, to maybe piggyback on your points, I truly believe we learn math with addition first versus subtraction. Subtraction is a much harder exercise, and this budget year we are going through a subtraction exercise, and that means a reduction of some sort. Next slide, please. So the board has seen this communications timeline. Based on your board feedback, this timeline is updated to reflect dates that we have been able to schedule. The dates for your board hosted update session, I do want to highlight we just can't find a perfect date when everyone can be in attendance. So I'm happy to get feedback from your board on these dates so that we can get them locked in with our community partners. So this week marks when our departments have completed their budget entry into the system. So they have completed that work. Finance then does, I'll call it just their magic guru, making sure things balance. And the ACAs and I will be hearing department budget presentations this coming week. And that really starts the process of the internal starting to balance the budget and make some of the internal hard decisions that will feed into your proposed balanced budget. So we are in the thick of budget work right now. The community doesn't see this point in time, nor does the board necessarily see this. So I just wanted to bring in light the huge task that is in front of staff. I also want to just mention there have been overlapping impacts So the president's executive orders and the halt and freeze on federal funding came at the height of when departments were trying to finalize their budgets. And what I mean by that is the systems were frozen so that we could not access the federal funds in many cases that our staff rely on to push out to community. Chair, you had mentioned the current state of our software system or our ERP. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability, nor does our interim CFO, John Steyer, to just press a button and be able to find out and get a printout of here are the sources of all of our federal funds. So we have been going through a 2-week process because we actually have to work with every department to actually collect that information. Through this process, we will be smarter, and I'm really grateful for the board's ARPA framework. We have hired our first ever centralized grants coordinator. So William has started with the county at the perfect time to be really helping us through the process that we need to go through right now to improve just our grants process. And he comes with a great, rich experience. So I'm going to pause there, and Chair, I'm going to actually turn it back to you to see if you and your board have questions just on the timeline or want to focus on any aspects.
So I would like to highlight a few things that the board can see right before them. So on March 18th, we will meet with our budget committee colleagues for a budget update so that especially they are up to speed on our adopted proposed budget guiding principles, as well as the priority direction that we have provided to the county administrator as she works with the agency staff to come up with a proposed budget. And I expect that we will hear questions from our budget committee colleagues to try and better understand what the President Trump executive orders mean. On the, I think it's Friday the 19th. Oh, excuse me. No, it's Wednesday, March 19th. We're going to have that budget information session for our elected colleagues, be it mayors, city councilors, special district board members, so that they are on the information journey. I know there are a couple, well, there's at least one mayor who would very much like to be in the decision-making seat that we each are in. This is the best we can do, I think, to help them be on the journey. Then we're into the month of April. April 14th, we have the budget committee orientation. This is where we are all asked to come together for that annual training. Whether it's changed or not, it helps us come together and all be on the same page with regard to our role and responsibility. Then on April 28th, you'll see that there are 3 listings all on that same day. The proposed budget is released. The budget committee has a meeting that evening where Ms. Angie will be presenting the proposed budget, particularly the budget message, as well as information being pumped out through all of our social media, earned media channels as well. So at that point, there are things like press briefings on our budget. Then we have some time to review that proposed budget, the summary information, all the detail information. And this is another part where I really want to continue to give kudos to our staff. Back in 2019, we didn't get the detailed budget delivered to us. We got only the summary budget. But our team has advanced the work so that we get that complete picture all at one time. So we're all going to be digging in, reading our budget, sending our questions to the staff. And that includes our budget committee colleagues, and our community members can also deliver questions to our staff. Our staff has said committed to turn around 2 different deliverables of answers to the various questions. First on May 7th, that's before we have our first budget committee meeting. Then on May 12th, we, the board, wanted to have an information session for our community on the proposed budget. This is where we may hear some additional questions, but we will only have the proposed budget at that time. This is just going into the process of our budget committee meetings. Our budget committee meetings then kick off on May 14th through the 16th. Then on, I think it's Thursday, the 15th, staff has committed. We have to get our Q&A to them, and they will get us a final Q&A on the 16th. The following week, we will have our budget committee meetings again. We'll have that full public hearing and action from the budget committee to approve the budget. And then we continue to move through the process in June. So I really wanted to highlight for the board March 18th, March 19th, April 14th. You already had March 28th, but also May 12th. Because March 18th is different, but March 19th and April 12th, those are the 2 board posted meetings around the proposed budget. So just wanted to reinforce those dates. And I would like to note that we don't have a specific date for State of the County yet. I know I have booked my summer vacation from June 19th as a holiday. I know I fly out either the 19th or the 20th. I can't remember. And I return home on like July 6th. So, yeah. Okay, now it's time for board conversation on this timeline, and I see Commissioner Fye has a question. Go ahead, Commissioner Fye.
Good morning, Chair Harrington. Thank you. I think I heard you correctly, but I think the dates are, I don't see April 12th, but I think you meant May 12th. The board hosted. Okay.
You can count on me to get months wrong all the time. For some reason, it's one of my weaknesses. So is everybody thumbs up? You've all internalized the calendar? Okay. Okay, great. So if we could proceed over to the next slides. This is just coming back to our principles. Oops, where'd they go? It was in
Next
the
slide, please.
There we go. Keep going. Okay. These are the principles and priorities that we, well, it spans 3 slides, but I wanted to make sure you had this at your fingertips so that we would have everything we might need with regard to the context towards thinking about that the difficult decision making that staff and Ms. Angie are going through to develop that balanced proposed budget. So these are just here as a reference for us. If we go to the next slide, this is the first of two budget priority slides. And some of these, are really challenging. Well, pretty much all of them are challenging, but if we go to the next slide, the one that I think is hard for some folks to digest is really prioritizing countywide revenue on countywide services. This can be very difficult for some subgroups of our community to really accept that there are going to be service level changes that they don't want. Well, guess what? I'm right there with them. I don't want it either. But at the end of the day, we have to ensure that we have a solid, functional, sustainable county government and adopt a balanced budget. So I know I'm trying to exercise my muscles, really strengthen my muscles for being in, whether it's one-on-one conversations or small group or large group conversations, to recognize that I don't want us to have to do away with certain services that have we've come to know and love in certain areas, but nonetheless, this is our task. And this is where Ms. Angie, I will be benefiting from some further discussion or guidance from you and our county communications expert through Philip Bransford on how to have that softer touch that communicates and lets folks know that it's not about repeating that these are hard decisions, but really delivering the message that there is a base level of services. There are a lot of words on these pages, right? But how do we make sure that we're able to let folks know that when I think about myself as a Washington County resident, I take for granted all the systems that are in place for me to have an orderly life, whether it's traffic signals that I can use a crosswalk safely, that I feel safe in my neighborhoods, that elections happen in a predictable way, that tax bills arrive and are on a sound foundation, all those things that we don't necessarily think about, but that our societal structures are built upon. Anyway.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that, Chair, that's a great point, and staff are thinking about that. In addition, as we focus on the budget principles and priorities, even after the reductions and the hard decisions that need to be made, Washington County is still working for the community and with the community. And so that also is a message that will be lifted up through the messaging too. Yes, there will be reductions, and there still will be significant services delivered daily.
Yeah. So if we could advance to a slide that's titled Progress Towards Financial Sustainability or Stability. There you go. These, I even with some of our elected partners, some of our own phraseology, such as we see here, sounds like real inside baseball language. So I don't know, colleagues, this is meant to be more of a conversation and a discussion, not a presentation per se. I guess all the board members have all these slides in their packet, so I think we could take the slides away. And let me just throw an open question out there for each board member. Given the base information that's in your packet, what kind of questions are going through your head as you foresee that we'll each individually have to digest the proposed budget, as well as go through our budget committee meetings and our final board decision making? Commissioner Snyder, go ahead.
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm not, nothing I'm about to say is going to be something you've not all probably heard or thought about, but I'm really giving consideration to how sort of my mental framework and decision making is going to look through this budget process. And I am really going to be relying on the analysis or multiple analyses that are being done to compare what we're required to do in each area of sort of county lines of business, if you will, what is being done at a higher level than necessary, what is being done at sort of a medium level, what is being done at sort of base level of anything less would be unacceptable, and really systematically going through each area in with that lens, and then looking at what the things are that are either optional or are being done at a higher level than is required, and really making thoughtful decisions or recommendations literally item by item or program by program. And that's sort of how I'm mentally preparing to do this work. And so having that information will be critical. I think that's already information we're going to have, but I did want to speak to that I am, as I think more about this and the task ahead of us, that is going to be one of my guiding approaches to thinking about it.
Why don't we continue to go through the round robin of each of the commissioners responding to this question, and then we'll come back to the set and some possibilities. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the things I was going to address Jason's question, but I'm going to put mine out there first. And that is that as we determine what our cuts are going to be and what the difficult messages are going to be, I want to make sure that we have really strong talking points and that we have a consensus of agreement around how those talking points are presented, even in really difficult situations. Because I have a feeling, I don't have a feeling, I know that we're going to be in hard situations where we're asked questions and we'll have to respond. That's my question. How are we going to ensure that we have good information moving forward? I'm not worried about that, but also, you know, how we respond. And I would even suggest perhaps that we have a communication set up where we tell one another if we've had these conversations and what the results are, for example.
Noted. Who's next? I thank you, Commissioner Willie, for going next. You usually like to just sit back and ponder and come back to it in a subsequent meeting. So I appreciate your contributing now. Genuinely, I do.
Well, I had more trouble
unmuting, but I did get my hand raised, so I don't even know how I did that. So, so just as an example, Pam, to follow up on your comment, yesterday I met with the Washington County Chamber Policy Group. There was about, I don't know, 15, a good spread of private businesses and certainly interests. And Stephen Roberts and Jessica both attended with me to make sure I stayed on track. But the presentation was a little bit focused on budget and our budget situation. How did we get here? And then the secondary, of course, was MSTIP. There was a conversation, several questions to Stephen about the proposed rate increases. So it was a good kind of overall budget-focused conversation. I think the messaging that I communicated to them was received. We did talk about what do we do next, and so things like an operating levy was discussed as a comparison to school districts when they build new schools, and then they have to have an operating levy to pay for the teachers. And so it was a good broad discussion, and yeah, if you want the slide deck to that it was a good overview. So it was only like 6 or 7 slides, I think. But we easily went 45, 50 minutes. I think I was given 20 minutes. And so you can see that the conversation was pretty robust about that. So that's the kind of information I think, Pam, you were talking about, that we need to be communicating with us about who we're talking to and what's the communication. So yeah, thanks to Stephen.
What the hard questions were and what the answers were.
Well, the hard questions are always focused around MSTIP in this particular group. It's a continuing dialogue. But I think there was also, I think they heard the messaging of that we're in a hard place, that we've been making budget cuts for years now. We've got to stop that. We are down to the bone, and we've got to have other solutions. And I think they'd be more than willing to join us in that conversation once we get past this budget approval.
Thank you. Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair. I had to sit back and let Commissioner Willie chime in. Forced myself to sit back, but I saw you struggling, Commissioner Willie, but I thought I would let you go. Chair Harrington and team and Tanya, this is, yes, we've been on a bit of a journey with our budget processes and decision-making. But I think what's different this year, and what I really liked that you said, Tanya, about the community and providing that little bit of a comfort comment. This year is going to be a bit of a different, there's 3 layers of impact. Yes, people are going to be impacted, meaning people, employees. Yes, services are going to be impacted. And yes, the community is going to be impacted. But what I really appreciate is we have a solid 9 principles, budget principles, that we can really guide ourselves and rely on to minimize whatever we can as in our power to minimize those impacts, those 3 layers of impact. While our budget priorities, they read like competing sort of priorities, and in addition, we have external challenges and priorities and things that we have to pause and respond to. I really think that our 9 principles for this year is going to be something that we're really going to have to repeat and remind ourselves to minimize this impact to our community. So yes, it's going to be hard decision-making process to walk into, but I think while priorities may change, we have principles that we need to remind ourselves that should not change and guide ourselves unless we have to. So I feel good about our principles, and I feel good about the level of information that we're gonna get to make that informed decision. So I really think that we're gonna lean into each other and we're gonna lean into our staff to educate us to sort of make that smart decision that really minimizes the personnel impact, the service impact, and the community impact walking into. And then get on this journey of, how do we go into positioning the organization for the future? Because that is one principles that we have. So in a nutshell, yes, it's going to be a bit of a dicey process, but we have good principles to lean into.
So kudos to us. Well, despite all my pre-positioning of this question, to finish the round robin, I'll do two things. I'll speak as myself, as chair, as one of five, and then I'll try to summarize some of the things that I heard that may be some next steps for us to come back to in March and onward, but also ask Ms. Angie for her thoughts and what she thinks we might be asking for differently. So for me, part of what I'm really wanting to make sure is, given that we've been on this reduction journey the whole time that I've been on the commission and as chair, we have been revealing a lot, making difficult decisions to both invest in the county government for sustainable operations, but also operations for the now and into the future. We've done a lot of that foundation building. And I think we have a pretty good vocabulary and specific examples for representing that to the community. But what I'm continuing to struggle with is, why is this time different, right? And so it comes back to that vocabulary. And I'm very self-critical here, where for whatever reason, I just don't think I'm able to boil it down to that 30-second elevator speech. So for me, that's something that I'm hoping to improve on between now and the end of April. So reflecting on some of the things that I heard here, I think you do, as I think we as a group have a lot to be proud of through our multiple years of using guiding principles and budget priorities, particularly as Commissioner Fine noted. Some of what I heard of is picking up on Commissioner Snyder. Perhaps we can touch on in March, Ms. Angie, our common vocabulary. As we heard Commissioner Snyder talking about, what are we required to do, a higher level, medium level, base level, systematic, optional, higher level. We need to all be have access to a common vocabulary, right? And help our budget committee members embrace that vocabulary, which may be something to start with our meeting with them in March, but come back to it for sure at that April, what is it, the 14th? See, I already lost track of the dates here. The April 14th meeting. I really do. I liked the suggestion about what are those talking points, but also what's the response, right? I appreciate, Commissioner Willie, that you gave us feedback, very timely feedback on your meeting with the Washington County Chamber Policy Group, how it went, what some of the key questions were. Commissioner Treese and I were at the WEA Government Relations Committee this morning, and I took screenshots of the presentation, and I'm relying upon Grace. I hope you're listening. I'm relying upon your expertise to package that up so that all commissioners have access to it. It's not using the OneDrive to provide access to information isn't quite as easy as just taking a file and sending it out using the BCC communications list, okay, through email. So it'll be great. I'm picking on you, Commissioner Willie, in that one specific example. Thank you. It'd be great if Meta can make that presentation available to us. I'm sure they utilized slides we've already seen, right? Through our budget work, through work sessions, roundtables, through our Board of Commissioners work sessions on MISTIP, on all transportation funding. It's all information we know, but seeing how it is crisply packaged up is very useful as well. Once again, what the discussion was, what those hard questions and responses were, I think is really helpful. And as Commissioner Fye talked about, our guiding principles do talk about trying to minimize the impact, understanding service impact on community members' daily lives. Yeah, there's a lot there. Ms. Angie, any other thoughts you want to share?
So there's a few themes that I'm hearing. Is relative to consistent language. We'll take that feedback and talk with departments too. I think that's both for budget book, also presentations, communication. So there's a connection point in there. So we'll continue to work on that. And as we go through this process, as you hear me commonly say, we're a learning organization, so please continue to provide feedback through this process because we are truly going through this together as a One Washington County team, and that includes the partnership with the board. So that continuous feedback is just helpful for us because you are hearing sometimes from different people or different audiences than we are. And so we want to be responsive to your board's needs. I did also hear a desire for what is the elevator speech, or when you're walking on the sidewalk or on the trail, like how would you describe this budget? And that is not the same as personally, I love my budget message every year, but I'm kind of a public sector junkie. So that's not always the language that resonates with our community members. So we will try to distill something down into a shorter, just kind of conversation piece for your board to be able to use as well. And then relative to the March, your March roundtable, understanding there's a desire to come back and have this conversation around the shared language piece. I think we'll be able to use the work that we've completed through the service level assessment as some of that language piece to have that discussion with your board and at your March roundtable.
I think there are also a couple of organizational changes that I've seen us embrace since January of 2019, and I'll try and put some diagrams together. I'll do my usual, I'll go over it with Ms. Angie in advance of our next roundtable and then bring those forward here. So yeah, for our March 6th roundtable, which is really only around the corner. So great. Is there anything else that I'll just open the table now versus doing a specific round robin? Anything else around getting prepared for budget intensity in the coming months that you wanted to raise? Go ahead, Commissioner Snyder.
Just slightly more concrete, County Administrator Angie, is the budget presentation that is going to come to us going, I guess this is an ask and a question, maybe a combo of both. It would be very helpful, I think, when we're looking at the materials to sort of have the service level information at a high level as we're looking at a particular department or service. Is that your plan as to how that will be presented to the budget committee?
Can I take that as a question and say,
Sure.
let me get back to the board?
I think
that?
having it somehow very, in a very simple, I'm not talking a big, what's the regulatory framework for this or anything else, sort of like, just the basics at a high level would, I think, be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's for myself, responding to that idea for consideration. If I use my Hollywood Square window as an example, right? If this is a presentation slide, it might be really useful to have a graphic up here, or maybe it's a graphic on a standalone slide that's sort of like a temperature gauge, a level of, well, here's where we've historically been, and here's the level of using that common vocabulary that this proposed budget proposes. Just a one view snapshot. So it's a crisp once at a glance. This is what it is for this program, as there are different programs per department, sort of, not department, functional area, because usually that's how we get the presentation, by functional area, right? So we would get one, if I'll take public safety, and then it would be, we'd have it for health and human services, we'd have it for housing, we'd have it for community development, general government. For each of those programs or aspects underneath the functional area, get that at a glance for each of those major areas, as that's the structure of the budget too. Does that make sense?
It does. Let me work with the team and follow back up with the board. And I appreciate the board's kind of brainstorming too. And and we're all listening.
Yeah, we're just trying to give some ideas of how it may be easier for us to digest together.
Yep, I hear that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, and I think it goes without saying, there may be other thoughts and ideas that you have between, I'll get back to you in a second, Commissioner Willie, after our March 6th roundtable, but before the proposed budget, because we won't have any more roundtables between March 6th, but you will continue to have your one-on-ones with Ms. Angie, and we will continue to have our public work sessions as well. So if in talking with Ms. Angie, you've got some other great, bright ideas, just bring them to the work session. We can brainstorm them together. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Thanks for this conversation, Chair, and it has been good and certainly necessary. But I am going to jump off and go to my COPAC meeting at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So thanks, everybody, and stay warm. Enjoy the snow because it's fun.
Okay, so we're going to move to our next aspect of this, and it's around my title, all my title, Personnel Management Systems and Policy Discussion. This is once again related to our work as an organization. So this is once again a discussion. You see in your packet the information that we had at a prior, I can't remember if it was a roundtable or a work session, with regard to our human resource transformation. We found, as we've all started our service. Hello there, Lisa Tackett, our Chief HR Officer. Oops, she went away. We've all seen, hi there. We've all seen as we started our service at different times that the systems, the processes, the structure of the organization had gotten stale or out of date. You've heard me use the word decrepit a few times. Depends upon what system we're talking about. So we are very fortunate to have terrific leaders here at Washington County, Ms. Angie, Lisa Tackett, the full executive team, Mr. Steyer, as well as our interim CFO. I mean, you name it. But this is an area where Lisa has come in, has really taken a hard look at what our business systems are. She's continued to ensure that the HR team continues its business services throughout the organization to keep that service delivery going, to keep developing the workforce. So it's all systems go, advancement happening. But like with our financial system, we are having to acquire new systems here as an agency and continue to work on our culture. So Lisa came to us in a roundtable and gave us this presentation. What I know I remember back in 2019, before the two of them started, Commissioner Willie and probably Commissioner Treese remember that we were getting some new personnel policies proposed, and each of those policies had a line in them about how this policy would be reviewed every 3 years. And come to find out, that was a standard line in everything, and such reviews were never performed because we as a board didn't provide the tools to our staff to actually do that work. Well, through HR transformation, we have put our support behind making sure that we are making those improvements to advance our organization. It's going to take a little time, but I have full confidence in them and how they're going about it. So this is a good time, Ms. Angie, for you to remind us of the board's role with regard to this space. We only included that HR transformation information into the packet so that you had ready access to it at your fingertips. So at this juncture, Ms. Angie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so thank you, board. And Lisa, is working through some tech challenges, so she apologizes that her camera keeps going on and off, but this is the joys of sometimes virtual meetings.
Lisa, is it, I'm not so worried about seeing your shining face. Can you unmute?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Good. That.
So Lisa today will actually walk through the presentation because this is a great status update on the progress that we've been making in each of the areas of HR. Commissioner Snyder, this will be the first time that you'll be hearing this presentation. So it'll be a good introduction to how we approach human resources from a strategy perspective here at the county, the transformation journey that we're on. And I'm just really pleased to share the updates. While we are talking, and Lisa's leading us through this presentation, HR is not a function that is just owned by HR. It is owned collectively by our One Washington County team. So this transformation could not have occurred without the support from your board. And I just want to highlight in your board's budget principles and priorities, we do highlight the importance of our employees within your budget guidance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to lead your board through an update. Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. And again, apologies on the technology. My default camera keeps flipping, and so it just turns it off. So, but it's important you hear what I have to say, and really appreciate the time with all of you today. And it is previously and shared the original HR transformation presentation. And so now we've had, I've been here, it was a year in October, and so we've gained some traction. And one of the first things is really about bringing stability to the department. There had been transition in leadership. There had been some reorganization within the department itself, creating its current structure and kind of pulling apart and creating more expert type positions in various subject matters rather than generalist positions. And we had a number of vacancies when I came on board, and those have been filled, and we're fully staffed with the exception of one position in risk management right now. And we've spent the last year focusing on documenting our processes, questioning our processes, looking at them. Are they still relevant? Do they work? And creating efficiencies where we can. It creates transparency, not only for managers that we work with, but also employees, that they understand what the processes are and what they can expect. And also by focusing on our processes, it brings consistency, which in the world of HR is very important. And also it's important to feel as though they're being treated similarly as to other employees. And I am fighting. So with that, next slide, please. And here's the org chart in human resources. And so there I am at the top in the Chief Human Resources Officer role. And we have a Deputy Chief Human Resources Officer. And you'll recall this is new position in the last year. We reclassed the Employee and Labor Relations Manager position into a deputy. So this position does oversee the senior HR business partners, who are the ones that are primarily working in departments on personnel matters, investigations, and so forth. So as independent contributors, they report to the deputy. And I think at this stage that is very important because that's the area where there's a lot of work being done on consistency, compliance, employee experience, and supporting managers. Also, you'll see under that column of the org, the talent acquisition manager. And so our TAP team, we have 7 TAP members, and Amanda, the manager, makes that 8. And then learning and development, Brianna Jackson, that is a manager role, and she now has 1 direct report dedicated solely to learning and development, and that was a recent hire. And then over on the other side of the screen, you'll see the units that report directly up through me, and it's more that operational standpoint of classification and compensation, benefits and leave. Risk management is a division in and of itself, and then HR business systems. So we'll go in more detail, but that's kind of the information hub of HR. Next slide.
So Lisa, as you transition, I just want to clarify something for the board. When we state new positions, that's part of a restructuring strategy. There are no new net FTE in HR. So as we work through this budget, every department looks at how should we structure our work as we've had workforce reduction. So I just want to underscore there's been no net new FTE.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. So we'll start with the acquisition. This is an area where, really there's that heavy transactional component of the recruiting cycle. And so they do that full recruitment cycle of vacancy planning, supporting managers on work on sourcing candidates. They screen applications. And in fact, last year, they screened over 12,000 applications that come in. And so one of their initial things they do is screening for whether candidates meet minimum qualifications to pass them through to the next stages of the selection process. And then they support managers with the actual selection process. So interview questions, panel interviews, and then the scoring, and then, making the offers and getting our qualified candidates in the door. They also do, so that's more the transactional piece, and then there's that recruitment consulting piece. And they've been doing a lot of work on best practices. And so previously, there's like the panel member guide. This is how, the best way to be a panel member. And here's how you recognize unconscious bias and how that might affect the recruitment. So we've expanded that to do interview panel orientations and then debriefs. And so that's, again, part of that recruitment cycle of a fair, competitive recruitment, that compliance piece, but then also how are we vetting candidates to really find that ideal candidate for the job. And so it's kind of wrapping all of those aspects into our process and, again, just further streamlining our recruitment plans and improving the process for all involved. We've also expanded out and doing more outreach. We hadn't had the capacity in the department in the past, mainly with, transition in that work group with the manager. But they did 11 events. They went to 11 career fairs this year. And so we're back out in the community and, sharing that Washington County is a large employer and we're a great employer, and sharing information, hoping people. So talent acquisition, any questions? Oh, I'm hoping my microphone is working. Good, okay. It's telling me it's doing funny things again. So
it cuts in and out a little bit, but we're getting almost, or at least I'm getting almost all of it.
Okay, good. This is fun.
So maybe just turn your video off so your system knows. Just prioritize audio. That'd be great.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm ready to move on to the next slide, learning and development. And so learning development is really about promoting employee skill development. It's furthering our goal of being a learning organization and focusing on continuous learning. But we also do a lot of compliance training, and we partner with various departments like OEICE. We share the campaign. We send out a campaign every year on discrimination, harassment, and retaliation-free workplace. And so they're virtual, but they're in-person live sessions. And so we conducted 35 of those learning sessions so that every employee and manager attended. And we are in the high 90% rate of completion for that, which is very important. And there's been a heavy focus on ensuring employees are privy to those learning sessions. We also have a HIPAA training session. So as you know, we handle protected health information, personal health information in various areas around the county. So we went through and identified each position that engages in that type of work and offered training to them so that they're compliant in how they handle protected health information. And we had 670 employees complete that learning. And then a more recent one is Title II, and again, partnering with OEICE, and that's that people with disabilities are able to effectively engage with their government, and that we're eliminating those barriers and we're supporting folks so they have access. And so we did another look at all the job descriptions that have public-facing components to them, identified them, and then assigned this training. So far, it's part one of a 3 training part series, and we've had 791 completions. These are important learnings, and we're trying to move beyond compliance in the county and offer other skill sets and trainings that support managers and supervisors and others who are they don't have a formal leadership role but are informal leaders in the county. And we're developing through the strategic plan update and our HR work plan a leadership cohort style like learning program, and then also trying to return our focus back to supervisor training on supervisor fundamentals. But there are, just with capacity, it's a little bit slow, but we're inching towards that. And Brianna Jackson also provides training consultation to departments. They'll reach out looking for a particular training topic. We'll help them find a consultant if that's needed, or other resources. And we're also, she's the administrator for NeoGov Learn. And so that's our current learning management system. You'll hear more about Workday and the new ERP, but we'll be looking forward to our new Workday LMS. Next slide. So with learning and development, yes, so I pretty much covered all of this. So next slide, please. So employee and labor relations, I mentioned before, they're the ones in the departments meeting with employees and managers, conducting investigations. They're the direct link to labor relations, working with unions and the departments. They coach managers. They engage in conflict resolution. They're really like the main consultative branch, I would say, of human resources. So next slide. And what we're really trying to achieve is, again, that standardized document process that I mentioned before for transparency, consistency, compliance with any kind of legislative or regulatory requirements. And Chair, you had mentioned the policy review, reviewing policies. We're working a lot on policy interpretation. Many of them were written before many of us worked here. And so interpreting them so we have that consistent application. And we meet weekly to go over case reviews to ensure on that consistency that we're handling similar matters in different departments similarly. And again, they're the ones that conduct supervisor training. Outside of what I just mentioned with learning and development, they do independent supervisor trainings in departments on various topics that might come up where supervisors or managers need support. Some of the things that we've been working on this year in the way of improvement is minor certificate compliance. So that's come up with, we do have some areas that hire minors, particularly seasonally, in ensuring compliance of the hours they can work, the type of work they can do, and making sure we have the appropriate regulatory compliance certificate in place. And so that's been successful. We revised our personnel improvement process, so performance improvement process, sorry. When an employee is not meeting expectations, they're finding aspects of their position challenging and they need support. Sometimes a supervisor will place them, we call it a PIP, a performance improvement plan. And this can be very stressful for employees. So drawing on human-centered approaches, we've created access for employees with human resources personnel to help provide that proactive support for them. So there's the relationship between the manager and the employee. There's human resources supporting the manager through appropriately administering this process, but then we thought, who's supporting the employee through this? And so providing support there. We've increased engagement with departments on performance management. And so they're in on regular meetings at the executive level. They'll sit in on those meetings. They meet with supervisory levels, throughout the different levels of the org. And it's a great way to keep the ears open and just listen to see where we can lend support. And then, again, standardizing those standard operating procedures. On the collective bargaining front, we've been really busy. So we've negotiated 2 successor agreements last year. And so that's the Oregon Nurses Association and then AFSCME over in Community Corrections Center. And we did learn from that process. We went into it with some process improvements and came out of it with further areas where we felt we could improve as an agency and how we enter into negotiations. And so we're applying those new learnings to the contracts we're currently engaged in. And as you'll recall, over in the juvenile department, there's the new group that formed AFSCME. So we've engaged with that group. We just kicked that contract off. We're about at the midway point with WCPOA, the new sergeant contract. And then in March, we'll be kicking off the deputy district attorneys who recently unionized as well. And so through that, we're, especially with these new groups, we've been providing Labor 101 training in our orientation for the internal labor negotiation team for the county, so that they understand what the process is, what we're trying to achieve, and then also the pitfalls, which sometimes can be easily to tip into because it is a new process for many. And then establishing very clear roles and responsibilities on the team. And then, of course, that communication point with the board towards the beginning and the midpoint of the bargaining session. And then we're going to be kicking off 2 more contracts over in the sheriff's office, the Enforcement and Corrections Unit and the support group. Their contracts expire at the end of this year, so we'll have more opportunity, end of this fiscal year, I should say. We'll have additional opportunity to apply as we continuously learn through the labor negotiations process. Apply those learnings to the process. And we can move on to the next slide with benefits and leave. And so this is an area that has just been booming. Particularly on the leave side, it just keeps expanding from a legislative standpoint. And on the benefit side, the inherent challenges we're having with increased costs in our healthcare benefits. And so what the benefits team generally does is they hold open enrollment for employees. They administer the county-wide wellness program. They hold the contract with Canopy, our employee assistance program. And then with new hire open enrollment, and we have new people coming into the county, making sure that they elect their benefits, and then also when they have life changes throughout the policy year, that those are updated. And on the leave side, FEMLA has been pretty steady legislatively, but the Oregon Family Leave Act, OFLA, and then Paid Leave Oregon, PLO, there's still ongoing changes there. And then, of course, leave also supports employees with reasonable accommodations under the ADA. Next slide. They've really done a lot of work in this last year on the benefits plan. I really give a lot of credit to Debbie Watkins and then our brokers, USI. They've really leaned into the negotiations of our contracts with our healthcare providers and on the renewal rates. I think between a strong relationship with those carriers, with Providence and with Kaiser, and with a lot of skill with the personnel that are working on that, we're doing better than other agencies, and keeping the fingers crossed for next policy year that we'll have similar success. But we'll talk through the budget cycle about some of those trends that we're seeing and some of those cost drivers. I'll save that for another day. But some of the successes we've had, though, is that focusing again on the employees and that human-centered approach, we brought back wellness fairs. And so it's the first one in 5 years, 300 employees attended. We had vendors from our area and just a myriad of different services that they provide. And we also had our healthcare vendors on site too, so the employees could talk about, there's so much in our benefits that, just looking through a guide or, picking around online, but actually talking to somebody to learn what robust benefits package that the county does offer, and what are the different things that an employee can utilize in those plans. So we got really good feedback, and it was just a really nice time for people to come together too and see each other. Like all the different departments attend, and it's just a nice like engagement situation as well. So in addition to the wellness fair, we have our annual benefits fair, and that's around open enrollment time, more focused on benefit offerings. We had 200 employees attend that. And I think I shared in the past that we won the second place in the 2024 Healthiest Employer Award. Again, Lane County beat us out, but we're applying again this year, so we'll see. And then a really exciting thing, that we did is we offered a wellness grant to departments, and this was really well received. We received wellness dollars from our carriers. So Providence and Kaiser give us a lump sum of wellness dollars that we can apply to various wellness events. So that's usually what funds like our wellness fair and our benefits fair, swag, webinars. Sometimes if we need to bring in a consultant or something on a topic. And, each year we try to use that strategically. And this past year we thought, a lot of people just like, it's hard to get away from their desks. We keep talking about capacity and the amount of work that employees are doing, just the stress of change, the change that is occurring in the county, and how in the middle of the day can we help employees through that? Like, what can we do, to make it easier? And so we had $15,000 in wellness monies left over, created a grant application, and departments, we applied that money and made wellness rooms. We bought ice makers. People love their ice. We talk about the ice on the first floor of public services building, but not everyone has that ice machine. Just like people with seasonal affect disorder and just not getting enough sunlight. So we bought those sun lamps for departments to have so someone can sit under one for a while. Just a lot of really great things. And it was what the departments, what they needed. It wasn't like us in HR prescribing what we think they need. And so through the application of that $15,000, it touches 1,780 employees around the county who have benefit to that. So on the leave side, I think with PLO, paid leave Oregon, leaves are up, and that's a good thing. Like, people are taking the time they need to take care of themselves and their family. And so we've had 600 leaves administered this past year in 2024, and we had 70 ADA accommodations that were that HR supported for employees. And so again, that's just those human-centered approaches and supporting employees through hard times, and then supporting them in the work that they do every day. And we also did some policy updates. There was some changes in legislation to work after PERS retirements. We updated that policy, changes with PLO as mentioned. Oh yes, Chair, you have a question.
I just wanted to highlight that Commissioner Snyder had his hand up earlier. So before you moved off of the slide, I wasn't sure when it was coming, so I wanted to come back to him. That's all. Thank you.
I took it down because, Lisa, you answered my question. I was going to ask you for a couple of really good examples of what the grants were used for, just to give us a flavor for that. But you did that without me even having to ask.
Woohoo! Awesome, thank you. And I cannot see all of you on my screen right now, so if a hand pops up, yes, please alert me to it. That's great. I'm glad I answered your question. And so there's some changes. We have an ADA policy. Not that there's really any changes to the American with Disabilities Act and our obligations under it as an employer, but we're creating a new procedure along with it, because that really outlines how the system works and how that process works for employees, and again, brings that transparency, can serve as a further resource for them. Okay, and I'm ready to move on to the next slide with classification and compensation. And generally what Class Comp, as we call it, does is they maintain our classifications. There are over 360 of them in the county. So those are different positions nest under classifications. We have different positions that are grouped more broadly in a classification. We make recommendations to the county's pay structure, which we bring forward to you for your approval. And we work with departments on like reorgs and structuring their work in positions. Oftentimes they'll come to us and say, I need this classification in this position. But when we break that down and unpack it a bit, it turns out that it might be slightly different. Sometimes it's exactly what they needed, and other times we offer recommendations of a different structure. We help determine pay for the work that positions perform. So there is Oregon Equal Pay Act. So we have that process and system here at the county that we apply. And also we do, well, what we used to do, and we're moving, you'll see when we move to the next slide, we used to do like ad hoc salary surveys, particularly for bargaining with our union contracts. But we're going to be moving forward to our class comp study, which I'll touch on in a moment. But we also develop different pay strategies. That's the basic function of class comp. And moving on to the next slide, we can talk about what we've achieved in this last year. And the big one is the job description project. We kicked that off late last calendar year and created a new job description template, did an orientation and training around with each department and in multiple work groups, and set them to the task of creating job descriptions. And so we do not have unique job descriptions at the county. We have classifications that are built out a little bit more to be sort of a hybrid of a classification, like a class spec and a job description. And so the job descriptions contain more detail and the uniqueness of the work that an employee performs. And so it's really bringing a lot of information and shedding light on the type of work that employees are doing. And Chair?
I'm confused.
Yes.
So you helped me understand that our class and comp system was really old. This is our first good, thorough update in about 20 years. So what I'm hoping to get anchored on with this slide is there's where we've been and where you have us moving to. Or maybe you're already done and I'm just catching up. But if I heard you correctly on the previous slide, there are about 360 different classifications. And I thought from a previous meeting that you were making sure that for each of the positions across the agency that there was or would be a job description. So I'm confused because I'm not an HR professional, right? I have, decades of managerial experience, but I'm trying to grasp where you're trying to have us land. What satisfies classifications and what satisfies job descriptions?
Yes, and so you are not alone in confusion, because I would say out of all the aspects of HR, classification compensation is the most complex. And it's hard because it deals with employee salaries at the end of the day. And it's so hard to explain how we got there because it's such a complex system. And so a classification is that general grouping of types of work. And so that's why we have 360 of those, but we have 2,300 positions that fit in underneath a classification, one of those 360. But even in the same classification, you can have 10 positions and they all do slightly different things. And that's what a job description will capture. And that's where we'll really learn and be informed about the type of work employees are doing. And so we don't have that information now because we don't have true job descriptions in the county.
Is this an endeavor that will take you and the rest of the management team across the agency approximately how much time to get done? Is this a multi-year effort, or is this within one business year? I'm trying to not use calendar, trying to not use calendar year or fiscal year, but what kind of a lift is this?
Tremendous. And we're mostly through it. I give a ton of credit to the class comp team and also departments. They have been extremely engaged and have really put in a lot of time and effort. I can't express the amount of appreciation because this information supports a number of initiatives for the county, like large initiatives. And one of them is Workday. And that's why we're doing this work now. And we have a timeline of finishing job descriptions because ultimately when we go live with Workday, this information will help support the efficiency and the administration of HR, through that new, at least on our end, it's a human resources information system.
Light bulb moments for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Treese has her hand raised.
I just want to say thank you for this work. And, I've been involved in these types of things previously, and it is a huge amount of work. It's very, it's very tedious, but it's also foundational to so many parts of the company. So, the county, talking with the other hat on here for a moment. But so this work will just pay dividends for many, many areas and into the future. The other piece, though, is the maintenance of the work that's been done and to keep it moving forward. So thank you.
Yes. And so there will be that future work, right?
Yes.
Updating job descriptions as jobs change. And Commissioner Treese, you do touch upon some really appropriate, and I saw, at least I don't see everyone, but Commissioner Snyder, I saw your head nodding too, about the foundational work that job descriptions support. And it's ADA accommodation. How do we know how to support an employee if we don't know the work that they're doing? Or at least that we all have a common understanding, right? I think we know what the work is, but that it's documented and we can point to it. Light duty returns from workers' comp injury or any kind of illness, like how do we know that someone can safely come back? Like what are their jobs with their restrictions? And then ultimately,
So Commissioner Fye, I can't tell if your screen is frozen or if you're with us and following the topic. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Can you hear me? Not
Yes.
if you can hear. Okay. No, just listening here.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
for checking in.
Yeah. And so on the job descriptions, like I said, we're past the halfway point. The last count was we have 1,500 completed job descriptions, and so that's excellent work. Let's see. Yeah, and so the other big project that Class Comp is working on is the classification and compensation study. And as you'll recall, last budget cycle, we had that one-time funding through SIP to support the study this fiscal year. And we went through the RFP process, selected a vendor. It's HR Answers. They're local. I think they're even here in Washington County. I think they're out of Tigard. And they have robust experience in working with public agencies, which is really important because we do comp studies differently than like a private employer would, and it's very unique and also very, very local sometimes too, the differences. And so we kicked that off. The team is meeting weekly with them. We're working right now on what's the county's compensation philosophy, like determining some of those high level policy conversations that will be coming up the chain here shortly. They're looking at all of our information, our org charts, just all the data that we've gathered to date, and becoming grounded in that, so they have an understanding of our organization before they actually engage in the study itself. They're going to be looking at our comp structure, our classifications, differentials between different positions, and just looking to make sure it all makes sense, and looking at it holistically across the county under that one Washington County concept. So we should have the study completed and have results by the end of the fiscal year. And then next fiscal year is the conversation on implementation. Right now, we need the information, and we need to understand what's broke, what's working, where are we off market, where are we on market, where are we above market. We don't really have a comprehensive understanding of that as we sit here today, and will by the end of this process. So other things that we're working on, again, creating like internal salary audits. So this team has really been working interactively with employees, with reclassifications, partnering with the talent acquisition team for transparency and salary placement that comes up. I think it's, especially for someone that's coming into public agency, and Oregon Equal Pay and how we set pay, creating that transparency of process so it's understood and it's clear, and creating partnerships around the county. Class Comp has instituted office hours every Friday where supervisors, managers, even employees that have questions can bring those forward and have their questions answered. And even networking, again, networking with other public agencies and having, periodic quarterly meetings with them and touching base on like, what are they seeing? What are the hard, filled positions? Are you experiencing the same challenges? Like, what's your turnover rate? And just creating that network, because ultimately there are comparators too, and who we compare our salaries with. And I'm ready to move on to human resources business systems on the next slide. And I mentioned before, this is our HR data resource, information hub. And this is the group that processes personnel actions, which right now are PDF forms that come through, and we manually input all the salary data, new employee data, pay increases, when there's a change in like an organizational structure, when people separate from the city or county, or hire into the county, they're the ones that maintain all the people data. And it is very much a manual process right now. They do, they run reports, and so a lot of, they will partner with budget on pulling all of the information out of our current Oracle, AKA Wizard system, to utilize within the Questica budget system. And we're really looking forward, next slide please, to Workday. So this is the group that we have 2.5 FTE. By the way, there's like 3 FTE on this part of the team. 2.5 of them are fully dedicated to the Workday project, or the ERP project, upgrading from Oracle. They've spent like 2,400 hours thus far building the system. Where we're at now is, let's see, they are working they just completed customer confirmation meetings. So our system generally is built, and we met with Cognizant, the consultant that's supporting the effort, and they're running us through the system. So it's the first time we saw our data in Workday functioning, and basically we tested to see if it's meeting the specs that we set out for the system. And so what we're starting now shortly is the unit testing phase. And that's where we're testing the system to make sure, that everything's flowing correctly, and that the business process is moving along in a way that is intended. And the individuals on this team have already spent like 3 to 6 weeks of training in the system before building it. Just a lot of time invested in this. And it's so far seems to be going well. So the things we can look forward to is that the folks on this team, their work is going to be changing in the future. As I mentioned, it's more manual right now, and they're oftentimes very transactional. And they spend about, when you in Oracle, like IT is working on 75% of it is like technical support of the system, and HR provides 25% of more of that functional support in the system. It's going to be shifting heavily with Workday. It's so intuitive and I'll say more user easy that there will be 75% of functional support provided by HR. So it'll be automated, it'll create efficiencies. And so the work won't lessen, it will just change and develop. And so it'll turn more into system support, and then also generating reports and data and doing more of that data-informed processes that help us make better decisions. Commissioner Tree?
Thank you. Lisa, Workday, is Workday commonly used in other governmental entities? It sure seems like it. I know the state uses it and others. So are we late to the party here?
Yeah, I'd say yes, we are. Okay. So at my previous agency across the river, Clark County went before the city of Vancouver, and so let's see, Vancouver implemented in 2019. But it's funny because it's like we all implemented Oracle around the same time. So we just hung around in Oracle a little bit longer than other agencies maybe.
Yeah, until Oracle no longer supported our systems. So we can proudly say we've jumped generations implementation. And I'm just so proud of Ms. Angie, how you and your team went through a request for, it's not proposals, inquiry, whatever, to assess different vendors and their solution to what would fit the need for Washington County, not just now, but looking into the future. Hats off to you. Somewhat related to Commissioner Treese's question, I have not finished reading the latest quarterly report. So my bad there. Ms. Angie or Lisa, could you please remind me, will the ERP work be completed this calendar year or before the end of next calendar year or beyond?
So the target date for, we call it go live, implementation of the system is December 2025. That's what the current project timeline is. Mm-hmm. It's the original project timeline, that hasn't changed. So as far as I know, we're on time.
We are on time, and if I can just add to that, that includes pre-testing before the go live date. So that's incorporated in that go live date. Also, and this is, I'm putting this in IT or software language, Workday is what's considered a tier 1 ERP system. So what tier 1 is, that's the best of class within ERP solutions, and is typically a large organization like ours is looking for a tier 1 versus a tier 2 or below.
And so, and then at this point, since we're on the topic of Workday, while the Human Resources Business Systems team is like, it's their core function and their area of work, as we're building the new ERP and Workday, all the functional areas that I covered today are a part of that process, and we have subject matter experts that have been pulled in to support that process development, the business processes, in the system. And we've had to sit back and revisit some of them. So like one of them is our performance management. Right now we use like a PDF fillable form that gets uploaded and stored in not Oracle, but probably a different system. I don't even know where that one's stored. We use probably about 5 or more different systems right now in HR for the holistic human resources information systems. And a lot of that will be in Workday, and it has so much more functionality that we're going to be automating how we do performance evaluations. We're going to be automating how we conduct discipline and notify them. It'll no longer be an email with a pre-disciplinary letter. All of that will route through Workday. And so through this build, we've spent a lot of time examining our processes and improving them, for this go live. Chair?
No, I'll hold my question or comment till later. Thank you.
Okay, all right. And so that's, I'll move on then to risk management. It's our final functional area in HR. The next slide, please. And so risk management, it has a very unique and different function from all of the ones that I just shared. Probably the closest tie would be workers' compensation claim administration, right, where we're connecting with employees with their work injuries, and then also providing safety and ergonomic support. Outside of that, it's the work group that procures and maintains all the lines of insurance for property casualty and workers' comp. And it does risk mitigation strategies. It transfers risk. There's a lot of different tools that we utilize to do that through contracting and different measures. The next slide. And so with HR transformation, like, how do you apply human-centered and infuse equity into risk management, which oftentimes can seem, yes.
Commissioner Snyder raised his hand.
There we go.
We're switching slides.
Lisa, just so I'm clear, and maybe this is an educational thing for me, but is risk management in the county organization, this is overall organizational risk management and it's housed in HR?
Correct.
Okay, I mean, that's not typical, obviously. It sounds like you've got, I'm guessing you've never been in an organization where that was in your portfolio, but maybe. Certainly the parts that are related to people I get, but maybe at some point, not during this meeting, someone can give me a little background and history on how and why this is where it is.
Well, I think that's a really good question, but it's appropriate for Ms. Angie to help us really get anchored in terms of the major functional areas of the county and where we're at now and where she sees us going forward, given that it's a management structure thing where we have CAO and county council.
Okay.
So let's kind of walk through and I'll make some comments at the end to kind of and also Jason, I'll speak to how, because even though it's housed in HR, there's a how we do our work that addresses the overlapping structural need of risk and the impacts on multiple departments, including county council.
Sure, and to the extent that, you don't need to take a bunch of time today at this meeting necessarily, unless everybody wants to hear it. Okay. It sounds like Chair Harrington would like to hear it too. Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about how we structure the work and approach risk. And Lisa, maybe you can weave that into some of your comments, even talking about the risk committee structure. And Courtney may have some comments in this too.
Yeah. And if I may too, I'm not one that likes to toot her own horn. But rest assured that even though this sits in HR and it seems maybe like it's an unusual fit, I was in my past a trained attorney, did litigation, workers' comp, tort claims, all of that. I no longer practice law. I don't claim to practice law. I'll give you my caveat. I don't give legal advice. But also I've previously worked as a risk manager and also HR director. So it, at least for our purposes, it fits for me. Yes, and I feel like I'm a solid expert in the area. And so as I go through, so applying those human-centered approaches, oftentimes with risk management, whether it be a member of the community that trips and falls on the sidewalk or, is involved in an automobile collision and the county driver is at fault, how do we manage the claim according to best practices, but also preserve the relationship with our community in managing that claim in a way where the individual feels supported, but still we're adhering to our financial practices and our obligations under the law. And so it's through communication and the outreach and working with that claimant. And also in resolving sometimes early, especially those smaller ones, they don't fester into something larger and become a larger claim or a lawsuit. And so applying human-centered approaches and supporting people just to help them through the process adds value. And then, infusing equity as well with workers' compensation claims. Those are our employees. If they're hurt and it's a compensable claim, we take care of them. We want them back to work. We want them to feel supported. Staying at home and not working doesn't help. And, again, it's about communication and listening to the needs, but still being consistent and compliant under the structure of our workers' compensation program. There is the risk committee that Ms. Angie referenced, and so that's a committee that it's a member from county council, the risk manager, and then an assistant county administrator, and they'll meet on claims within a certain dollar threshold before it would escalate to the county administrator or to the board based on those dollar thresholds. And so they talk about the claim strategy, the merits of the claim, to help set reserves and that financial component of it. And so I think when we do come forward to you, I think you see those members in the executive session presenting to you. We do data analysis in risk management. So through our third-party administrator on workers' comp, and then we administer liability claims in-house. So we have an adjuster on the team, and we have a risk information system that manages all that information. And we run reports. We meet with departments on a regular basis and share with them so they can see what their claim trends look like. And if we're seeing any patterns, we can have conversations around that to either mitigate it or at least identify what those riskier factors are of the work that we perform. And some of the things that we're been working on is establishing clearer parameters around light duty work. We've noticed where it had been more informal and it becomes more of an informal ADA accommodation and not a true light duty return to work agreement. So aligning that with best practice for that consistency and to make sure that we're within the confines of the law and we're not, informal ADA accommodations are, they're not supportive for anyone that's involved. We built an online portal for ergonomic requests. So employees who are finding their workstation challenging in certain ways can come forward and ask for an ergonomic evaluation. And we've been working on greater collaboration with internal business partners, providing that education, again, that data analytic piece. And I think through all of these measures, we're mitigating the severity of claims, and our recent data is trending down, and it's the first time in 5 years that our claim rate is at a low, and it's down by 9%. And also by, I think with the improvement to the light duty work parameters and, supporting employees through the workers' comp process, our time loss has been reduced by 23%. So the amount of time that employees away from work has been reduced. Any other questions on risk management?
Yes, because I need a little bit more help absorbing the idea of infusing equity as part of risk management. Mm-hmm. I'll admit I didn't get it. Could you go over that again for me?
Yes. And so it comes down to consistency. And so if we offer light duty to one employee and another employee fits a similar circumstance, we should be trying to offer light duty to another employee. So it's about consistency in how we manage our claims. And that can look different from department to department. The work is different. And sometimes the ability for employees to come back in a modified status can be different. But applying that equity lens and just consistency of process and, and having a process first and foremost. So working with our third-party administrator on those leads to better results.
So this also gets to, just because you ask does not mean you are the one who should be able to benefit from light duty. The consistency in process gives employees information, supervisors the information, so that there's better resources for it to be known, because many employees don't know to ask to. So that consistency approach, once again,
Access.
yep.
Word access, Captain. Got it.
Correct. And that also does connect back to our job description conversation. And so being clear about what the duties are in job description helps us identify what those light duty options can be for employees.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, and that was a lot. I went over our time again. My apologies. It's a lot to share. We have a lot of really great stuff going on in human resources.
Well, so let's do the round robin of the four of us that are still here. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments with regard to the HR transformation work? And you can shake your head no, and that's fine.
I'll just say I had a number of questions that mostly were answered during the presentation. So I would have been asking about timelines and other things, but everything got covered.
Great. Commissioner Treese, go ahead.
I just want to say kudos, Lisa, to you and your group for the amount of work that's been done. You haven't been here all that long. And I just want to point out, along with the transformational work, you've been handling the HR business, the day-to-day business, from the standpoint of, all the other pieces that go together to keep the county running while you're doing the transformation work. So I guess I would ask, the question I want to ask is, how is your staff holding up under this?
Yeah, that's it. I think there's two ways to answer that. I think they're excited, they feel supported, they like the direction HR is going in. So I think that energizes them. I also have a team of high performers, but I do hear in some cases about burnout, and I do hear, the concerns that are raised. I'm fortunate that we have good relationships with staff, managers, myself, and so we have those conversations, and we've talked about, what's a priority, what can wait, and so we might have been further along in this transformation. I think we made a lot of progress, but I have had to pump the brakes on some just to manage the workload to make sure, it's reasonable and realistic.
And I guess in asking that question, what I'm encouraging is that dynamic of, managing the pressure versus the end product, and what happens in the meantime with budgets and everything else that's going on. Mm-hmm. So thank you for your answer.
Commissioner Fye, anything?
This was a great grounding, Lisa. Thank you. You're grappling with a lot. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll make another few comments. I am really so pleased, Ms. Angie and Lisa Tackett, that you brought this update to us. A tremendous amount of work has been done. And so, Commissioner Snyder, just by way of example, a lot of this did not exist prior to these two joining us. HR was deep within the organization, had gotten way behind the time, and was struggling to, the pay equity bills were pretty new, and the organization was struggling with, how do we comply with these state deadlines? And as we learned in a very harsh way through 19, 20, and 21, our systems really needed to advance. So it's not just that they've made improvements, they have advanced, made leaps. So you're joining at a great time. Yeah, there's still work ahead, right? Construction ahead is definitely happening with the ERP. As Ms. Angie talks about, our structures, processes. I can't remember the third thing that you often use in your phrase, Ms. Angie. Another example, in 2020, early 2020, I worked with then interim CAO Stephen Rhodes, a name you might recognize, Jason Snyder. And it was time for me to ensure that between he and I, the staff assistant for the chair received her 1-year review. And he walked into my office. So I had proactively asked him, what systems do I need to use, right? So that the two of us accomplish this. And he appreciated my taking on the project since he had just joined the organization in January. And we were going through the national search for Ms. Angie and dealing with COVID. Boy, was it an intense time. He walked into my office one day and said, "You're not going to like this." And he waved the sheet of paper in my hand and then gave it to me. And it was a non-useful survey. And he said, "That's it. That's all we have for performance management for you." So, and, you know, having my decades of management experience, I certainly expected a lot more of myself. So he and I put our heads together and got through that so that we did right for the employee. So thank you, Ms. Angie and Lisa, for helping us not only improve the culture for our large workforce, but also to transform the structure and processes of the agency for the second half of the 2020s and beyond. We're in very good hands. The topic of infusing equity, I just want to mention, I'll come back to the phrase vocabulary. Something that I will be pursuing with Ms. Angie and our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer. Through my Metro Supportive Housing Services activities, you know, the two committees, well, I guess now there's a third, but the Oversight Committee as well as TCPB, there have been some interesting conversations around equity and vocabulary. So things like don't use the phrase dominant culture. A more reasonable term may be mainstream culture. Also, some folks are turned off by the phrase best practices. If we think about how we're centering equity, I'll be harsh about it. The dominant culture has had certain practices in place. They're not necessarily best when we think about being a multicultural community, as we are here in Washington County. So for lack of anything else at this time, instead of referring to best practices, I'm more comfortable in using the phrase advancing practices. But I think these are things we need to think about as Washington County. And I think Ms. Sojourner probably has some recommendations for us working with Ms. Angie, Lisa Takich, and the whole executive leadership team. So, you know, we've talked here about human-centered. We've also talked about trauma-informed, things of that nature. So I just wanted to share that recent experience as I am longing to improve my vocabulary works set as we move forward in the remainder of the fiscal year 24-25 and beyond. So anyway, thank you again, Ms. Angie and Lisa, for this update. Very, very useful. And onward ho we go together. So I'm grasping, there we go, for my agenda. Ms. Angie, is there anything else you would like to offer up at this time?
No, I will just alert the board. I'm starting to receive weather updates. So as customary, when I receive weather updates from PGE, I will forward them to your board. And then please know that you will be receiving updates from Brittany Miller in emergency management because John Wheeler is out of the office. So we will keep your board updated on any information that we have.
Okay. Well, let me turn it over to the board at this juncture and see if you have any other thoughts for today's roundtable. And it looks like Commissioner Treese is at the ready.
Yeah. So, like I said, I really appreciate this update. But what it brings to mind, and I'm not looking at my rolling agenda, so I don't know, and perhaps you can help me, Tanya. It makes me it tickles my imagination as to what's happening with the ERP. What are our dates there in not just HR, but in other areas as well. So can you tell me when we're going to get an update?
I wish I could say I have the rolling agenda memorized, but I don't. So I will get back to your board when we will have a written update and then appropriate time for a verbal update. Because right now we are in what I would call the sausage making phase internally, but we'll determine what an appropriate update, verbal or written, is.
Well, so what I thought I would do, if I could interject here, is we the board need to get on the same page. So I thought I would, as I mentioned earlier, join forces with Ms. Angie and bring some information to the board at the March roundtable so that we all have the benefit of that.
Thank you. And, I'm going to say this was so interesting that see what happens. You provide information.
Open the door on one, and open all the other doors. But I do think
Tanya.
We need to sync up in terms of what are the major initiatives that are underway for the agency, but also check in on our board initiatives, our board focus list for the remainder of the year, and pull it all together so we have somewhat of an at a glance moment. Okay. Anything else for today, colleagues? No? Well, thank you very much. A nice, somewhat short roundtable for this month. We do have more ahead, so expect the March 6th roundtable to be a full day at this juncture until we get the agenda all set. All right? Okay, so we are now hereby adjourned. Everybody stay safe. Bye-bye.